The text from Victor's lawyer arrived while Elena Carter was standing in line for her 4th job interview that week. She read it once, then again, until the words blurred together. If you fail to provide proof of stable employment by Friday, we will petition for immediate primary custody. Her fingers tightened around her phone. Across the lobby, women in sharp blazers and polished heels spoke in calm, confident voices, carrying portfolios and coffees that cost more than the cash left in Elena's wallet. She looked down at her own reflection in the dark screen of her phone. A beige blouse bought 3 years ago, a skirt altered by hand the night before, low heels with a tiny crack near the strap. She had a degree in economics. She had graduated near the top of her class, but none of that seemed to matter now. For 8 years she had stayed home, raised her son, cooked for her husband's family, cleaned their rooms, managed birthdays, doctor appointments, dinner parties, dry cleaning, medications, and every quiet emergency no one else wanted to notice. Now, employers looked at her resume and saw only one thing, a gap too long to forgive. "Mrs. Carter?" the receptionist called. Elena stood quickly, smoothing her skirt. "It's Miss Carter," she said, forcing a polite smile. The interview lasted 11 minutes. She answered every question carefully, trying not to sound desperate. Yes, she could learn fast. Yes, she had strong organizational skills. Yes, she was comfortable with numbers. The hiring manager nodded, but Elena recognized the expression before the woman even spoke. It was the same one she had seen in every office that month. Sympathy first, then hesitation. "We're really looking for someone with recent corporate experience?" "Of course you are," Elena thought. By the time she stepped back onto the sidewalk, the afternoon wind had turned cold. She checked her bank balance. Then she checked the time. She needed to pick up Noah from school in 40 minutes. She still had to stop by the discount grocery store. Her stomach ached from coffee and nerves, but lunch had become a luxury 2 weeks ago. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Victor himself. "You should stop embarrassing yourself. My mother is right. Noah needs stability, not struggle." Elena stood frozen on the crowded sidewalk, blinking against sudden tears. Then she lifted her chin, locked her phone, and started walking. She had no idea that before the day ended, one ordinary bus stop and one familiar face from her past would open the first real door back into her life. 2 months earlier, Elena had left the Hale family home with one suitcase, one sleepy 6-year-old, and the strange numbness that comes after humiliation lasts too long. The house behind her was enormous, white stone and black iron, the kind of place people admired from the street. Elena had once believed it meant safety. Instead, it had become a museum of her silence. That final morning, she woke at 5, made breakfast out of habit, packed Noah's lunch, ironed Victor's shirt, and arranged fresh flowers in the dining room before remembering she no longer needed to do any of it. She stood in the kitchen holding a dish towel while the truth settled into her bones. Victor had moved his mistress from secret to obvious. Sabrina's lipstick had appeared on a wine glass. Her perfume had lingered in the guest room. And Victor no longer cared enough to hide the messages lighting up his phone at dinner. When Elena finally confronted him, he did not deny anything. He simply leaned back in his chair and told her she was being emotional. "You haven't worked in years," he said. "Let's not act like you have options." His mother, Meredith, had overheard from the doorway and stepped in without hesitation. "Victor has responsibilities," she said coolly. "A man under pressure needs peace when he comes home, not accusations." Peace. Elena almost laughed at the word. For years, she had cared for Meredith after surgery, hosted the family holidays, remembered every relative's medication and food allergy, and stayed awake through Noah's fevers while Victor slept untouched. She had not been treated like a wife. She had been treated like household infrastructure. Necessary, invisible, replaceable. The breaking point came when Sabrina appeared in the kitchen that Saturday morning, wearing sunglasses and Victor's favourite smile. She had the nerve to set her purse on the marble island and ask if there was almond milk. Elena looked at Victor. He did not speak. That silence ended the marriage more completely than any confession could have. By noon, Elena had called a lawyer. By evening, Victor's legal team had begun discussing separation terms as if they were planning a merger. Meredith warned that leaving the home would make Elena seem unstable. Victor warned that fighting him would be expensive. Sabrina, standing near the front door, said nothing at all. She only watched with bright, satisfied eyes. So Elena packed what she could, buckled Noah into the back seat, and drove away before she could lose her nerve. At a stoplight, Noah's small voice broke the silence. "Mum, are we going home?" Elena swallowed hard and looked at him in the mirror. "We're going somewhere better," she said. She didn't know if it was true yet. She only knew she had to keep saying it until one day it was. The apartment listing looked almost suspiciously affordable, which should have warned Elena that something about it would be complicated. It was a 2-bedroom unit in an older building on the edge of downtown, clean but modest, with sunlight in the kitchen and a landlord willing to split the lease month to month. Elena had hesitated when she read the phrase shared arrangement, but the price was low enough to make pride irrelevant. She arrived with Noah, 2 suitcases and 3 reusable grocery bags filled with folded clothes. The hallways smelled faintly of paint and old carpet. Noah leaned into her side, clutching his dinosaur backpack as Elena fumbled for the key the landlord had left under a ceramic planter. "Do you think the other person has a dog?" Noah whispered. "I hope not," Elena whispered back, because a dog would mean noise, mess, and a security deposit she could not afford. She opened the door and stepped into a tidy living room with a grey sofa, a stack of unopened mail, and a man standing on a chair trying to change a light bulb. He turned at the sound. For one blank second, Elena forgot every rehearsed sentence she had prepared. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and distractingly handsome in a careless way that made it worse. Dark hair, rolled-up sleeves, and the kind of easy face that belonged in expensive watch ads. He climbed down from the chair with surprising grace and looked between Elena and Noah. "You must be Elena," he said. "I'm Adrian." His voice was warm, casual, and annoyingly pleasant. Elena blinked. "You're the roommate?" He smiled. "I was about to ask the same thing." Noah peered around her coat and announced, "You don't look old." Adrian put a hand over his heart. "That may be the nicest thing anyone has ever said to me." Elena should have felt relieved that he seemed harmless. Instead, she felt off balance. She had expected a quiet woman, maybe a graduate student or a nurse on night shifts. Not this man with expensive posture and amused eyes, holding a light bulb like he had wandered into the wrong life and decided to stay anyway. The landlord had clearly neglected one small detail. Adrian had signed first, Elena had signed second, and neither had been told anything useful about the other. Elena set down her bags. "I'm only here because it's temporary." "Same," Adrian said. Something about the word made her look at him more closely. Temporary on him did not look desperate. It looked chosen. He noticed her hesitation and stepped aside. "The room on the left is yours. I cleared space in the bathroom cabinet. and I labelled the shelves in the fridge because shared kitchens have ended friendships." Noah laughed. Elena did not yet. Still, as she walked into the small bedroom with its clean window and narrow bed, she felt the first strange flicker of something she had not allowed herself in weeks. Not comfort, not trust, just the smallest, most dangerous kind of relief. Living with Adrian should have been awkward in all the obvious ways, but what unsettled Elena most was how quickly he made space for her without making her feel pitied. He left the bed a cabinet for her dishes, moved his shoes away from the front entrance after she nearly tripped over them once, and somehow learned Noah's routine within 3 days without ever acting as if he were intruding. It was the little things that disarmed her. Adrian noticed when Noah preferred his toast cut into squares. He remembered that Elena drank tea, not coffee, after sunset. He fixed the wobbling leg on the kitchen table with a folded matchbook and a screwdriver pulled from nowhere. He joked too much, smiled too easily, and never once asked Elena the question everyone else seemed to ask, with either curiosity or judgment. "What happened to your marriage?" Instead, he asked Noah what kind of dinosaur could beat a shark in a fight. He asked Elena whether she wanted the last clean towel. He asked if she minded late-night music, then played it quietly anyway. At first, Elena kept strict boundaries. Her room stayed closed. Her conversations stayed short. She paid her half of the rent down to the dollar and labelled the lunch meat she bought with a black marker because boundaries felt safer when they could be organised. Adrian noticed and pretended not to. That was another thing about him. He seemed to understand embarrassment without naming it. One rainy evening, Elena came home from another failed interview to find Noah sitting at the kitchen counter, colouring with Adrian. The sight stopped her in the doorway. Adrian had drawn a ridiculous dragon wearing a necktie. Noah was laughing so hard he nearly slid off the stool. "Mom," Noah shouted, "Adrian says dragons would be terrible accountants." Adrian glanced up. "Too much fire damage." The joke was silly, but Elena froze on one word. Accountants. She had mentioned her economics degree only once, in passing, while apologizing for spreading job applications across the table. He had remembered. Something in her chest shifted. That night, after Noah fell asleep, Elena stood at the sink washing dishes while Adrian dried them beside her. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and distant traffic below. "You don't have to help," she said. "I know. You keep doing things like that." He glanced over. "Like what?" "Being nice when it would be easier not to." Adrian shrugged, but his tone softened. "Maybe easy is overrated." Elena looked down at the plate in her hand. For a second she wanted to ask him who he really was, because he did not move like a man who had always lived with second-hand furniture and chipped mugs. He carried himself like someone used to being listened to. Someone who had once belonged in places with polished floors and private elevators. But before she could speak, his phone lit up on the counter. The name on the screen was Henry Vale. Adrian saw her eyes catch it and turned the phone face down without answering. That small motion told Elena more than words would have. Adrian was not running from nothing. He was running from somewhere very specific. Elena learned the truth about Adrian by accident, the way people learn the most important things, not from confession, but from a crack in someone's mask. It happened on a Sunday morning when Noah was building a blanket fort in the living room and Elena was trying to stretch $7 into 2 dinners. Adrian had gone out early, saying only that he had family business, and returning 3 hours later with a split lip and a silence so sharp it changed the apartment's temperature. He stood at the kitchen sink, running water over his knuckles. Elena set down the grocery circular in her hands. What happened? Nothing worth billing for. That doesn't look like nothing. He laughed once, but there was no humor in it. My grandfather and I disagree on my life choices. Elena reached for the dish towel and handed it to him. Up close, she could see the tension in his jaw. Did your grandfather hit you? She asked, before she could stop herself. That pulled a real smile from him. No, my cousin did, on my grandfather's behalf, emotionally speaking. Noah looked up from the fort. That's still bad manners. Adrian nodded solemnly. You're right. I'll add it to the family handbook. Later that afternoon, Elena was searching the kitchen drawer for tape when she found a folded business article under a takeout menu. She did not mean to read it, but one photograph caught her eye. Adrian. Not in jeans and a faded t-shirt, in a tailored suit, standing beside an elderly man with a hard expression, and the headline, Veils, Heir steps away from executive role amid family rift. Elena stared at the page. Veil Holdings. She knew the name. Everyone in the city did. Real estate, finance, hospitality, tech investments. A family rich enough to own buildings, people pointed at. When Adrian walked in and saw the article in her hand, he stopped. I was going to tell you, he said. When? When it stopped mattering? She folded the paper carefully. That's easy to say when you still belong to that world. His expression changed. Not right now, I don't. And then he told her enough to make the outline clear. His grandfather, Henry Vale, had cut off his trust, stripped him of his executive title, and thrown him out of the family penthouse after Adrian refused to marry the daughter of a business ally. According to Henry, Adrian had wasted too many years being charming instead of serious. He could either build a life without the family name or come back on their terms. So this is punishment, Elena said, quietly. This, Adrian replied, looking around the apartment, is apparently character development. She should have been angry that he hid it. Instead, she felt something more dangerous, recognition, because for the first time she realized they were both living in exile, just from very different kingdoms. Rejection became part of Elena's daily rhythm. Wake Noah, pack lunch, drop him at school. Print resumes at the library because ink cartridges had become too expensive. Ride buses across the city in sensible shoes. Smile at receptionists. Explain the employment gap. Watch interest fade from interviewers' eyes the moment they heard the years. By the second week of that routine, the script had become almost predictable. We're impressed by your academic record. You seem very capable. We just need someone more current. Current. As if motherhood had pushed her into another century. One afternoon, she left a mid-sized consulting firm after a particularly humiliating interview where a man young enough to have been her intern asked whether she would be comfortable taking direction from people with more practical experience. Practical. Elena wanted to ask how many of his employees could run a household budget, manage elder care, organize school logistics, and survive emotional warfare before lunch. Instead, she thanked him for his time and walked out with her spine straight. It was raining by then, the kind of cold spring rain that soaked through clothes without looking dramatic. Elena stood under a bus shelter checking her phone. One missed call from her lawyer. A reminder from the school about Noah's field trip payment. A message from Victor. Noah said you forgot his library book. You really are overwhelmed. Her throat burned. Elena, a voice called. She turned. The woman holding a black umbrella looked familiar and impossible at the same time, like a photograph from a better life stepping into the present. Sleek camel coat, sharp heels, confident eyes. Rachel Monroe, Elena said, Rachel broke into a stunned smile. "I knew it was you." They had studied economics together. Rachel had been ambitious, brilliant, relentless. Elena had once kept up with her. Once. They ducked into a nearby coffee shop to escape the rain. Rachel ordered for both of them without asking, the way old friends sometimes can. At first, they traded safe details, graduation, cities, time. Then Rachel asked what Elena was doing now. That simple question nearly broke her. She told the truth in pieces: marriage, Noah, divorce, job hunting, shared apartment. The words sounded thinner out loud than the life had felt. Rachel listened without interruption. No pity, no dramatic sympathy. Just attention. When Elena finished, Rachel leaned back and studied her. "Do you remember who got the highest score in Professor Lin's macroeconomics seminar?" Elena almost smiled. "You did?" Rachel shook her head. "No, you did. You always saw patterns before anyone else." Eleanor looked away. "That was a long time ago." "Maybe, but talent doesn't evaporate because bad people wasted your time." Rachel opened her tote, pulled out a business card, and slid it across the table. Vale Holdings. Elena stared at it. "I can't get you a full job," Rachel said, "but my division needs interns for a quarter. It's temporary, paid, and brutal. If you can survive it, you'll have real experience on paper. Apply tonight. I'll flag your name." Elena looked from the card to Rachel's face, her pulse suddenly loud in her ears. She had no idea that by walking into that company, she was about to step straight into the center of Adrian's fallen world. Eleanor almost did not apply. She sat at the apartment kitchen table after Noah went to bed, Rachel's business card beside her laptop, and stared at the Vale Holdings internship portal as if it might reject her preemptively. Temporary, strategic operations internship. 12 weeks, entry-level, fast-paced. Candidates must demonstrate analytical discipline, discretion, and adaptability under pressure. The words felt less like an opportunity than a dare. Adrian walked in halfway through her third attempt at uploading her resume. He set a paper bag of takeout on the counter and immediately noticed her expression. "You look like that portal personally insulted your ancestors," he said. She exhaled. "I'm applying for something." "What kind of something?" "A paid internship." "That's good." "It's humiliating." He leaned against the counter. "Those are not the same thing." Elena hesitated, then turned the laptop slightly so he could see the logo on the screen. For the first time since she had known him, Adrian went completely still. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "My friend Rachel works there. She said they need interns." He looked at the posting, then at her. "Rachel Monroe in Strategic Operations." "You know her?" "I know of her." The answer was too careful. Elena folded her arms. "If this is a bad idea, just say that." He shook his head. "No, it's just not an easy place. Easy hasn't really been available lately." That made him smile, but only faintly. He pulled out a chair and sat across from her, all teasing gone. "Then let me give you one piece of advice. If you go in there, don't apologize for being older than the other interns. Don't apologize for being a mother, and don't let anyone reduce you to the years you spent out of an office. Most people in corporate buildings are only pretending to know what they're doing." Elena studied him. "You sound like someone who's spent a lot of time around them." He tapped the table. "Occupational trauma." She should have pushed further. Instead, she returned to the application and typed carefully. Degree, University Honours, Household Financial Management. She almost deleted that line, then left it. Volunteer budgeting for school fundraisers, scheduling, vendor coordination. She reframed her invisible labour in language the corporate world might finally recognize. When she reached the final page, her hand hovered over the submit button. "What if I get in and fail?" she asked quietly. Adrian did not answer right away. Then he said, "Failure is surviving a life that makes you smaller and calling it security. Everything after that is just learning." Elena looked at him for a long second and clicked submit. 3 days later, she got the interview. 2 days after that, she got the internship. And when she walked into Vale Holdings on her first morning, in a borrowed blazer and shoes that pinched, the first face she saw in the elevator lobby was one she recognized from the article in Adrian's drawer. Henry Vale. The lobby of Vale Holdings looked like a place designed to make ordinary people feel measurable. Marble floors, glass walls, quiet employees moving fast in expensive clothes. Elena stood near the security desk holding her temporary badge while her pulse beat against her collarbone. She had arrived 20 minutes early and still felt late. Every polished surface seemed to reflect the same question back at her. "What are you doing here?" Rachel met her in the reception area with a bright, efficient smile and a folder tucked under one arm. "You made it," she said. Elena tried to smile back. Barely. "You're here. That's enough for today." Rachel gave her the quick tour. Strategic operations occupied the 26th floor. The internship team included 6 recent graduates, 1 MBA student, and Elena. The work would be messy, deadlines aggressive, expectations high. Rachel said all of this while walking fast enough to make it sound normal. Inside the open plan office, Elena could feel the difference immediately. The younger interns looked at her with polite confusion, as if they were trying to place whether she was someone's supervisor or someone's mother. One woman with a perfect ponytail and a sharper perfecta smile introduced herself as Talia and then asked, "So, what did you do before this?" Elena answered honestly, "I raised my son." The pause that followed was microscopic, but she felt it anyway. "Oh," Talia said, "that's nice." Nice. Elena nearly laughed. Rachel handed out the morning assignments: data entry, competitive research, expense reconciliation. Elena was given a stack of vendor invoices to organize and verify against an internal spreadsheet. The task was simple, almost insultingly so, but she took it without complaint. She needed a foothold before she demanded a staircase. By noon, she had already noticed 3 duplicated charges and 1 payment marked to the wrong project code. By 2, she found a pattern in the vendor dates that suggested someone in procurement had delayed filing to hide an overage. By 4, she had a color-coded list and a mild headache. Rachel glanced over the notes and raised an eyebrow. "You found all this in one afternoon?" Elena shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "Numbers tend to talk if you let them." Rachel's mouth twitched. "I missed that sentence in your interview." The praise should have comforted her, but the day turned stranger before it ended. As Elena left the building, exhausted and careful not to show it, a black car pulled up by the curb. The driver stepped out, opened the rear door, and Henry Vale emerged with the kind of quiet power that parted air. His gaze landed on Elena, not on the interns around her, on Elena. He looked at her for one steady second too long, as if recognizing something. Then he got into the car and drove away. That evening, when Elena walked into the apartment and told Adrian how her first day went, she saved Henry Vale for last. Adrian set down his glass very carefully. "He saw you?" he asked. And suddenly Elena understood that whatever world Adrian came from, she had just taken her first real step into the middle of it. Adrian listened without interrupting as Elena described her first day at Vale Holdings. The interns, the invoices, the awkwardness, the building that smelled like money and caution. But the moment she mentioned Henry Vale watching her at the curb, Something shuttered in Adrian's face. He walked to the kitchen, opened the fridge, then closed it without taking anything out. "You should have told me before I started there," Elena said quietly. He turned. "Told you what?" "That you're not just connected to the company. You are the company." "That's not true." "It was true enough for your grandfather to recognize me on sight." Adrian exhaled and leaned against the counter, rubbing a hand over the back of his neck. The usual ease was gone. "I didn't tell you because the second people know who I am, they stop acting normal, or they start acting strategic. I didn't want that in here." He looked around the apartment when he said "in here," and Elena understood he meant more than walls. She should have appreciated the honesty. Instead, she felt embarrassed. Suddenly every conversation between them seemed exposed to a new interpretation. Had he been kind because he liked her, or because helping a struggling woman with a child made him feel noble? Had Rachel recommended her because of merit, or because somehow Adrian had arranged it behind her back? "I got that internship on my own, didn't I?" she asked. His head snapped up. "Yes." "Did you say anything to Rachel?" "No." "Did your grandfather?" A pause, and there it was. "I don't know," Adrian said. The answer was honest, but it landed like betrayal. Elena stepped back. "I can't do this if people think I'm some charity case connected to you." "You're not." "You can say that because you've never had to earn dignity back 1 inch at a time." The instant the words left her mouth, she saw they had hit something deep. Adrian went still. "You think I haven't lost anything real," he said. "I think you had the luxury of losing from a much higher floor." Silence spread between them. From the hallway, Noah padded in, wearing pajamas and holding a stuffed shark. "Why are you both making your angry faces?" he asked. Neither answered fast enough. Adrian crouched to Noah's level. "Your mum had a hard day. I'm making pasta as emotional support." Noah accepted that explanation and wandered toward the television. Elena stared at Adrian, thrown off by how gently he shifted the mood. He looked back at her, tired rather than defensive. "You're right about one thing," he said softly. "I lost from a higher floor, but falling still hurts." Then he turned to the stove. That night Elena lay awake in the narrow bed, replaying his words. She wanted distance. She wanted certainty. Instead, all she could think about was how lonely he had sounded, and why that made her heart ache almost as much as her own. By Eleanor's 3rd week at Vale Holdings, she had learned 3 important truths. First, no one respected an intern until they became useful under pressure. Second, strategic departments were built as much on performance as on theatre. And third, Sabrina had an almost supernatural talent for appearing exactly where Elena's life was most fragile. The first attack came disguised as concern. Elena stepped out of the building one evening to find Sabrina leaning against a silver car parked across the street, sunglasses perched in her hair, one hand wrapped around an expensive iced drink. "Elena," she said brightly, as if they had once shared brunches instead of a husband. "I heard you found a little internship. Good for you." Elena kept walking. "Move." Sabrina fell into step beside her. "Victor worries about Noah, that's all. Such long hours for a mother in your position. And now he hears you're living with a man?" Elena stopped cold. Sabrina smiled. "You should be more careful who sees what." There were photos, of course. A grainy image of Adrian carrying groceries while Noah held his hand. Another of Elena unlocking the apartment door beside him. Innocent moments made to look intimate, curated, weaponized. "You had someone follow me?" Elena asked. Sabrina tipped her head, Don't be dramatic. We're only documenting instability. Elena's blood turned to ice. At work the next day, the damage spread in a different form. Talia from the intern class approached Elena in the break room with artificial casualness. "So, are you and Mr. Vale close?" Elena stared. "What?" Talia fiddled with her coffee lid. "People were saying Rachel pulled you in because of some family connection, and since you live with him." The sentence trailed off, but the implication didn't need help. Elena felt heat rise under her skin. Suddenly, every sideways glance from the office over the past week rearranged itself into something uglier. Pity, suspicion, gossip. She found Rachel in a conference room between meetings and closed the door behind her. "Did anyone ask you about me?" Elena demanded. Rachel's expression sharpened immediately. "Who said what?" Elena explained. Rachel's face hardened. "This company loves talent until it arrives in the wrong packaging," she said. "Ignore them." "I can't ignore this. If they think I'm here because of Adrian—" "You are not here because of Adrian." "But everyone knows his name." Rachel came around the table. "Then give them another reason to remember yours." Elena tried. She worked later, spoke less, triple-checked every report. But the pressure followed her home too. Victor's lawyer requested an emergency review of Noah's living situation. Meredith called and left a voicemail describing the apartment as unfit. Sabrina sent flowers with a note that read, "Stability matters." Elena threw them straight in the trash. That night, as she sat at the kitchen table, shaking from anger she could not afford to show in court, Adrian took the papers from her hand, read the custody request, and looked up with an expression Elena had never seen before. Not amused, not charming, just dangerous. Adrian read every page of Victor's emergency filing in silence. Elena watched his eyes move down the document, watched his jaw tighten, watched one hand flatten against the table as if holding something violent in place. When he finished, he set the papers down with unbearable care. "He's building a narrative," Adrian said. Elena gave a brittle laugh. "Thank you, counselor." "I'm serious." "So am I. He's done this our whole marriage. He makes me look unstable, then stands there acting concerned while everyone nods." Adrian pulled out the chair across from her and sat. "Listen to me. These photos are weak. The filing is aggressive because he thinks pressure will make you panic. Don't help him." She stared at him. "How am I supposed not to panic when he's trying to take my son?" At that exact moment, Noah began coughing from the bedroom. Elena pushed back from the table and hurried down the hall. Within seconds, the cough turned wet and miserable. By the time she reached him, his cheeks were flushed and his small body was trembling with fever. The next hour dissolved into chaos. Thermometer, wet washcloth, children's medicine, Noah crying that his head hurt. Elena trying to stay calm while her own heartbeat climbed higher with every degree on the screen. Adrian drove them to urgent care at nearly midnight because Elena's hands were shaking too badly to trust herself behind the wheel. At the clinic, under ugly fluorescent lights, Noah curled into Adrian's side while Elena filled out forms. The sight hit her unexpectedly hard. Adrian was patient, steady, absurdly good with children for a man who claimed no special skill. He distracted Noah with nonsense stories about sharks applying for office jobs and held the paper cup while he drank water. When the doctor finally said it was a bad virus and not an emergency, Elena almost cried from relief. Back at the apartment, Noah fell asleep on the couch with his head in Adrian's lap, while Elena stood in the kitchen heating soup no one was hungry for. "I can take the sofa tonight," Adrian said quietly, "in case his fever spikes again." Elena turned to answer and found him watching her with a softness that nearly undid her. "You don't have to keep rescuing me," she whispered. His gaze didn't move. "That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" For one suspended second, the apartment seemed to hold its breath. Adrian rose carefully so he wouldn't wake Noah and stepped toward her. Close enough for Elena to catch the clean scent of soap and rain on his coat. Close enough to see exhaustion in his eyes. "This," he said, voiced low, "is me trying very hard not to care about you more than is convenient." Elena forgot how to breathe. Then Noah stirred on the couch and the moment shattered. But after Adrian covered him with a blanket and turned off the kitchen light, Elena knew something had changed that could not be put back where it was. If Elena's life had been a cruelly timed play, Camille Laurent chose the perfect scene for her entrance. It happened during a Thursday afternoon strategy presentation when Elena was carrying coffee into a conference room and trying not to spill on the polished floor. Rachel had pulled her into the meeting at the last minute to take notes, which already felt like a promotion. Then the glass doors opened and a woman walked in who looked as if she had been assembled by elite institutions. Tall, poised, devastatingly composed. Dark blonde hair in a smooth twist, silk blouse, precise smile. The kind of confidence that did not need to perform because it had always been welcomed. Rachel leaned toward Elena and whispered, "That's Camille Laurent, Ph.D. from Zurich, market systems researcher, used to consult for the family office." Used to. Elena would not understand the full weight of the word until later that night when she walked into the apartment and found Camille sitting at the kitchen table with Adrian. The room stopped moving. Camille rose first, elegant and calm. "You must be Elena," she said, as if they had arranged this. "I've heard about you." Elena looked at Adrian. He stood too quickly. Camille showed up unannounced. Camille's smile deepened by 1 degree. "That makes me sound more dramatic than I intended." Noah came out of the bedroom holding a juice box and stared. "Who's the fancy lady?" he asked. No one had prepared for that question. Camille laughed softly. Adrian rubbed a hand over his mouth. Elena set down her bag harder than necessary. Over the next 20 minutes, the truth arranged itself piece by piece. Camille and Adrian had dated seriously 3 years earlier. Henry Vale had adored her. She was brilliant, refined, and entirely approved by the kind of family that treated relationships like strategic mergers. Then she left for a doctoral research fellowship in Europe, and the relationship ended somewhere between ambition and timing. Now she was back. "I came because your grandfather asked me to consult on a restructuring project," Camille said, her eyes flicking to Elena only briefly. "And because unfinished things deserve clarity." It was a perfectly chosen sentence, intelligent, gracious, impossible to accuse. Later, after Camille left, Elena rinsed Noah's cup at the sink, while Adrian stood in the doorway, silent. "You should have told me there was an unfinished thing," Elena said. "There wasn't." "Not until today." She nodded, but it didn't help. Camille represented everything Elena feared the world valued: Polish, pedigree, timing, and the ability to stand beside Adrian without ever looking like she had wandered into the wrong life. As if reading her thoughts, Adrian crossed the room. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Shrink." Elena laughed once, without humor. "You don't get to decide when I feel outclassed." He looked at her for a long second. "For the record, she didn't make me want to stay. You do." The words should have comforted her. Instead, they terrified her. Because for the first time, losing Adrian seemed like something that could hurt. Camille did not attack Elena the way Sabrina did. That would have been easier to fight. Instead, she moved through the edges of Elena's life with perfect courtesy, which somehow cut deeper. She praised Noah's manners. She complimented Elena's internship in the tone people use for children's drawings. She spoke to Adrian with effortless familiarity, as if their history were not over but simply paused for weather. And Henry Vale noticed everything. One Friday evening, Adrian received an invitation to a family dinner at his grandfather's townhouse. He had every intention of refusing until Henry added one line through his assistant, "Bring Ms. Carter. Since she now works in our orbit, I'd like to meet her properly." Elena wanted to say no. Adrian wanted to let her. But the custody hearing was 10 days away, and Elena had already learned that in her world, powerful men formed opinions about women long before they admitted it. If Henry Vale had already noticed her at the company, refusing the invitation might look suspicious. So she went. The townhouse was the sort of place that made silence expensive. Art on the walls, silver at the table, staff who moved like music. Eleanor wore the only navy dress she still owned from before Noah was born, and prayed the hem did not look outdated under the chandeliers. Camille arrived in cream silk. Of course she did. Dinner began politely and sharpened by degrees. Henry asked Eleanor about Vale Holdings in a tone that suggested he was testing not her knowledge, but her composure. Camille discussed global capital trends. Adrian deflected 2 comments about returning to leadership and ignored one about maturity. Elena answered carefully when spoken to and kept her hands steady around the water glass. Then Meredith Hale's name entered the room. It happened because Henry casually mentioned seeing an article about Victor Hale's upcoming charity gala. Camille, unaware or pretending to be, smiled at Elena and said, "That's your former family, isn't it?" The table quieted. "Yes," Elena said. Camille tilted her head. "That must be awkward, given the custody proceedings." Adrian set down his fork. "Camille?" But Henry was already watching Elena with new interest. "What exactly is Mr. Hale alleging?" he asked. There it was. The social version of a courtroom. Elena could have softened it. She could have smiled and said it was complicated. Instead, something tired and proud rose inside her. "He's alleging," she said evenly, "that a woman who spent years raising his child and managing his household has no economic value because he benefited from work. Had to name." No one moved. Henry Vale leaned back slightly. Camille looked surprised. Adrian looked something else, almost proud. Then Henry said, "And do you intend to prove him wrong?" Elena met his gaze. "No, sir. I intend to make it expensive that he ever said it." For the first time all evening, Henry smiled. But as Elena rode home in the town car beside Adrian, her phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. It contained a photo of Noah leaving school, and one line beneath it. "Mothers who invite chaos into their homes don't always get to keep their children." Elena did not scream when she saw the photo. She went colder than fear. The message stayed lit in her hand while the city moved outside the car window, all headlights and rain, and ordinary people who had no idea her entire body had just become one hard pulse of panic. Adrian took the phone from her before she could protest. He read the message once, then again. The temperature in the car seemed to drop. "Did Victor send this before?" he asked. "Meredith?" They both thought the same name at once. Sabrina. By the time they reached the apartment, Adrian was already making calls. Eleanor wanted to do something practical, anything, but her hands would not stop shaking. She checked on Noah first. He was asleep, one arm flung over his blanket, the familiar sight so innocent It made her chest hurt. Adrian came back into the living room 20 minutes later with controlled fury in his eyes. The school confirmed an unfamiliar woman asked questions at pickup yesterday. She claimed to be a family friend. Elena sat down hard. Oh my God! I've arranged for additional authorization notes and direct pickup verification starting tomorrow. Rachel also knows someone in corporate security. We'll see if the number can be traced. She looked up. You called Rachel? I called everyone useful. Then he crouched in front of her and took both her hands. Elena could not remember the last time someone had held her fear without trying to minimize it. Listen carefully, he said. Noah is safe. We are not waiting for them to escalate. Your lawyer gets this message tonight. Mine gets it too. Your lawyer. He held her gaze. I never stopped having one. That should have annoyed her. Instead, it almost made her laugh through the panic. The next day, the situation worsened before it improved. Sabrina posted a carefully vague comment online about women who use children as leverage while entertaining unstable living arrangements. Meredith shared an article about moral environments and custody. By afternoon, Victor's attorney filed supplemental concerns, citing Elijah, misnaming Adrian on purpose, and suggesting Noah was exposed to unrelated adult men overnight. Elena was in a supply closet at work trying not to cry when Rachel found her. You get 5 minutes, Rachel said, shutting the door behind her. Then you wash your face and come back out because if you disappear now, they win twice. Elena pressed a hand to her mouth. I'm so tired. Rachel's expression softened. I know, but tired and done are not the same thing. That night, Adrian sat with Noah at the kitchen table, helping him build a cardboard volcano for science class, while Elena drafted a statement for her lawyer. She looked up at them, Noah grinning, Adrian pretending the volcano needed a corporate restructuring plan, and felt something fierce and clear take shape inside her. They wanted to paint her as unstable. Fine. Then she would become something far more dangerous. Documented. The shift began with paperwork. Elena stopped reacting verbally and started building files. Every message from Victor, every voicemail from Meredith, every screenshot of Sabrina's public comments, every school note, grocery receipt, and custody exchange log. She color-coded folders at night after Noah fell asleep and arrived at work every morning with a face composed enough to discourage casual cruelty. At Vale Holdings, she was still the oldest intern and still the easiest person to underestimate, which became an advantage. While others talked, Elena listened. While others rushed presentations, she checked reconciliations. And because no one expected brilliance from the woman who packed apple slices in a dinosaur lunchbox, no one thought to hide their mistakes from her very carefully. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday evening after most of the office had left. Rachel had asked Elena to help verify a cross-divisional budget summary before it went to senior leadership. Elena was 3 columns deep into capital allocations when a number caught her eye, then another, then a pattern. 2 vendor entities with nearly identical naming structures, recurring advisory fees attached to a property development shell, reimbursements routed through a charitable subsidiary. It was clean enough to pass at a glance and wrong enough to make Elena sit up straight. She printed the pages, spread them across the desk, and followed the transfers with a pencil. By the time Rachel returned from a call, Elena had built a rough map. "What am I looking at?" Rachel asked. "A hidden relationship between 3 billing channels," Elena said, barely hearing her own voice. "Either someone's laundering internal overruns or disguising private payments as operating support." Rachel stared. "How fast did you find this?" Elena swallowed. "About 40 minutes. Rachel's expression changed from surprise to calculation. "Don't send anything yet." "Why?" because one of those channels touches a development partnership linked to Victor Hale. The room went silent. Elena looked up slowly. "You're kidding." "I wish I were." Rachel leaned closer to the documents. "Vale has a minority exposure through a hospitality fund. If these numbers are what they look like, Victor's been moving money in circles while claiming liquidity problems in court." Elena felt the blood rush in her ears. Hidden assets, distorted reporting. Maybe not enough to prove everything, but enough to pry something open. Rachel put both hands on the desk. "We do this carefully. If we're right, this is bigger than your divorce. If we're wrong, we still don't whisper a word outside this room. Understood?" Elena nodded. For the first time since leaving her marriage, she did not feel like prey. She felt useful. And when Adrian arrived home past midnight to find Elena still at the kitchen table, surrounded by spreadsheets, she looked up with exhausted, blazing eyes and said the words that changed everything. "I think I found where Victor buried the truth." Adrian did not ask Elena whether she was sure. That was one of the reasons she trusted him. He read what she showed him, asked 3 sharp questions, and immediately understood the shape of the risk. By morning, Rachel had quietly looped in Vale's internal legal counsel through a contact she trusted. By afternoon, Elena's divorce attorney, Evelyn Brooks, had a new line of inquiry she could pursue without revealing the corporate source. Victor had been playing poor with the court while moving money through layered business structures tied to a development project and a charitable front. Elena could not yet prove criminal intent, but she could prove inconsistency. And inconsistency, Evelyn said over speakerphone that night, was often the first loose thread in an expensive suit. "Do not confront him," Evelyn warned. "Do not even hint you know. Let him keep performing." Victor, unfortunately, was very good at performing. 3 days later, he invited Elena to a civil discussion at his mother's house regarding Noah's school schedule. Elena knew better, but Evelyn advised going with witnesses. Adrian wanted to attend. Elena refused. She was not going to hand Victor another narrative about inappropriate dependence. So she went alone. The dining room was arranged like an ambush disguised as hospitality. Meredith at the head of the table, Victor to her right, Sabrina in cream perched like a future portrait, tea already poured. Noah kept away under the pretense of a playdate. Victor began with the polished voice he used for donors and judges. "Elena, no one wants this to get uglier." "Then stop making it ugly." Meredith sighed as if burdened by lesser beings. "You have no steady income, no property, and you're living with a man whose reputation is publicly unstable. Think about what the court sees." Elena folded her hands in her lap. "The court will also see your son's financial disclosures." Victor's expression flickered, only for a second. Sabrina recovered first. "Elena, please, this bitterness is hurting Noah." That did it. Elena looked directly at her. "Did you enjoy following my child's school pickup?" The room froze. Sabrina's eyes widened with almost admirable speed. "I have no idea what you're talking about." Victor leaned forward. "Now you're making accusations?" "No," Elena said calmly. "I'm making note of your faces when I ask." For the first time, Meredith lost control of her expression. It was tiny, a crack. But Elena saw it. She stood, smoothing her skirt. "You spent years treating me like I was too dependent to survive without this family. That was your mistake. You confused delayed strength with permanent weakness." Victor's voice sharpened. "Be very careful." Elena picked up her bag. "I am. That's why I brought a recorder." She had not. But the panic that flashed across Sabrina's face was worth the lie. When Elena stepped back out into the afternoon sunlight, her knees nearly gave way from adrenaline. Then her phone rang. Evelyn Brooks. "We've got a subpoena path," the lawyer said. "And Elena? Your husband just made his first real mistake." The week before the custody hearing felt less like time passing and more like a wire pulled tighter every hour. At Vale Holdings, Elena continued working as if her life were not cracking open outside the office. At home, she memorized school schedules, parenting logs, and legal notes after Noah went to bed. She slept in fragments. Adrian slept even less. Camille noticed. She found Elena alone in the office cafe one evening after most employees had left. The city glowed beyond the windows, silver and distant. Camille set her tea on the table with deliberate gentleness. "I'm not here to fight with you," she said. Elena looked up from her laptop. "That's a comforting start." Camille almost smiled. "I came to tell you something you may not want to hear. Henry intends to offer Adrian a path back into leadership. Soon." Elena said nothing. "The condition," Camille continued, "is stability." There it was, the elegant knife. Elena closed the laptop. "And by stability, he means you." Camille did not deny it. "He means someone whose life won't become collateral. Adrian belongs in that world, Elena. Whatever he feels for you, eventually he'll have to choose between chaos and structure." The words should have enraged Elena. Instead, they landed on the sorest truth she carried. She was chaos on paper, pending divorce, custody battle, temporary housing, temporary job, a woman rebuilding from smoke. That night, she left the apartment before Adrian came home. Not forever, just enough to be cruel. She and Noah stayed with Rachel for 2 nights, while Elena told Adrian she needed space to think. He called. She didn't answer the first time, or the second. On the third call, she finally picked up, and his voice was stripped of all charm. "Don't let other people make decisions for us," he said. Eleanor closed her eyes. "This isn't about us." "That's a lie." Maybe it was. But the hearing was 48 hours away. Victor's attorneys were already using Adrian's name in filings, and Elena could not risk one more variable that made her look distracted, romantic, or dependent. When she returned to the apartment the next evening to collect Noah's medication, Adrian was waiting in the kitchen. He looked furious and wounded, which was worse. "You don't get to disappear every time someone tells you you're not enough," he said quietly. Elena gripped the edge of the counter. "I am trying to protect my son." "And I am trying to stand beside you while you do it." The silence that followed was raw enough to touch. Then Adrian stepped closer, lowered his voice, and said, "For once in your life, Elena, let someone stay without earning punishment for it." She almost reached for him. Instead, she picked up Noah's medicine and walked out before she could break in a way she would not recover from before court. She did not know that while she was choosing distance, Adrian was making a choice of his own, one that would put him back into direct war with his grandfather. Adrian went to Henry Vale's office the morning before the hearing and closed the door behind him without waiting to be invited. The room was all dark wood, skyline views, and inherited power. Henry looked up from a file with no visible surprise, as if he had been expecting this storm for years. "You look like your father when he was about to do something expensive," Henry said. Adrian stayed standing. "Withdraw Camille from whatever strategy you think you're running." Henry removed his glasses. "Camille is not a strategy. She is an adult woman with excellent judgment. She is also your preferred image of my future." Henry did not disagree. "And Ms. Carter is your rebellion." That landed badly. Adrian leaned forward, hands braced on the desk. "No, Elena is the first honest thing I've chosen in years." The old man studied him for a long moment. Honesty is not the same as suitability. Adrian laughed once, bitterly. Suitability? You backed Victor Hale on development deals because he looked polished at dinners. Meanwhile, the woman you dismiss as collateral found irregularities your executives missed. That made Henry's eyes sharpen. So it was her. Adrian straightened. You knew? I suspected. Rachel doesn't move that carefully unless she's protecting real intelligence. Henry folded his hands. Your Ms. Carter has instincts, but instincts do not simplify the rest of her life. There it was again, the reduction, as if Elena's pain were a stain instead of evidence of endurance. Adrian's voice went cold. If you try to use my position, my money, or Camille to pressure her again, I will walk away from the company so completely you won't even be able to turn my absence into a lesson. For the first time, Henry looked old rather than powerful. You think love is a sufficient qualification for leadership? He asked. No, Adrian said, but I think seeing value where other people see inconvenience might be. The silence stretched. Then Henry opened a drawer, removed a folder, and slid it across the desk. Inside were internal notes on Victor Hale's partnership exposure and a private memo flagging Sabrina's connection to a PR consultant known for online reputation manipulation. Adrian looked up. Henry's expression was unreadable. I don't approve of your methods, but I dislike sloppy predators even more. It was not affection. It was not an apology. From Henry Vale, it was practically a blessing. By the time Adrian left the building, he had forwarded the material to Evelyn Brooks and called Elena 3 times. She did not answer. Court was in 16 hours, and when Elena finally listened to his voicemail that night in Rachel's guest room, she sat down on the edge of the bed with tears in her eyes as his voice filled the quiet. I'm not asking you to choose me before the hearing, he said. I'm asking you not to forget that after tomorrow, I will still be here. The courtroom was smaller than Elena expected and colder than seemed necessary. She sat at the petitioner's table beside Evelyn Brooks in a navy suit that suddenly felt too thin for the day. Across the aisle, Victor looked polished and composed, one hand resting near a leather folder. Meredith sat behind him in pearls and certainty. Sabrina sat 2 seats down with the expression of a woman attending the unveiling of her own future. Noah was not there. Elena had insisted on that. The hearing began with Victor's attorney presenting the version of Elena's life he had designed for the judge to fear. Unstable housing, inconsistent income, exposure of the child to an unrelated adult male, emotional volatility following the separation. Elena listened with her hands locked together in her lap and learned in real time what it felt like to hear your survival translated into accusation. Then Evelyn stood. Her style was not theatrical, it was surgical. She began with Elena's caregiving record, school participation, medical consistency, and daily parenting history. Then she moved to the messages, the documented harassment, the anonymous threats, the social media insinuations, the emergency filing timed suspiciously after Elena gained employment. She established pattern, pressure, intent. Victor's attorney objected twice. Evelyn adjusted once and continued, and she pulled the thread that changed the room. Financial inconsistency. Using subpoenaed records and newly obtained partnership disclosures, Evelyn showed that Victor had claimed cash strain while routing money through layered entities tied to development investments and charitable fronts. She did not need to prove full fraud in family court. She only needed to prove that Victor had misrepresented stability while attacking Elena's. Victor's calm cracked first. Sabrina cracked second. When Evelyn introduced the reputation consultant connection and the timeline linking Sabrina to the anonymous custody pressure campaign, Sabrina whispered something urgent to Victor that the judge absolutely noticed. Then came the final blow. Evelyn played Meredith's voicemail, the one describing Elena's moral unfitness based on living with a man whose reputation she openly admitted she knew nothing about. It exposed not concern for Noah, but prejudice, strategy, and contempt. By the time Elena was called to speak, she no longer felt hunted, she felt clear. She answered simply. Yes, she had stayed home for years. Yes, she had no recent work history because she had been caring for her child and her husband's family full-time. Yes, she now worked, learned, documented, and protected. She did not ask the court to admire her sacrifice. She asked the court to see it accurately. When the judge recessed before ruling, Elena stepped into the hallway on shaking legs. And there, at the far end near the courthouse windows, stood Adrian. Not beside her, not pushing forward, just there, waiting exactly the way he had promised. The ruling came just after noon. Elena received primary custody. Victor was granted structured visitation pending further review of his financial disclosures and the conduct raised during the hearing. The judge ordered additional examination of asset reporting and admonished both Victor and Meredith for behavior that suggested litigation strategy had been prioritized over the child's emotional stability. Sabrina left the courtroom before the clerk finished speaking. Elena did not cry right away. Relief arrived too large for tears, like a locked room inside her chest, finally opening. Evelyn squeezed her shoulder once, firm and brief. "You did that?" the lawyer said. No one had ever said those words to Elena at the exact moment she needed them. Outside, the sky had cleared after 2 days of rain. Adrian was still in the hallway. He did not cross to her until she looked up and nodded, and that simple respect almost undid her more than the victory had. "It's over," she whispered. He shook his head gently. "No, the worst part is." That was when she finally cried. 3 months later, life no longer looked like punishment wearing better clothes. Elena completed her internship with the strongest review in the cohort and was offered a full-time analyst position in strategic operations. Rachel took her out for cheap noodles to celebrate because neither of them believed in wasting joy on expensive restaurants. Victor's financial investigation expanded into civil exposure. 2 board affiliations quietly disappeared from his biography. Meredith stopped calling. Sabrina moved out of the city after the PR consultant's name surfaced in a local business column. Public shame was not prison, but for people like them, it was close. At Vale Holdings, Henry offered Adrian a formal return to leadership. Adrian accepted on revised terms, earned authority, not ceremonial obedience. He no longer smiled like a man performing ease for approval. He smiled like someone who had chosen the life he wanted to stand in. And Elena? She moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment with Noah and windows that caught the morning sun. On the first weekend there, Noah taped a drawing to the fridge. It showed 3 figures holding hands. "Is that us?" Elena asked. Noah nodded. "Yeah, you, me, and Adrian. But I didn't draw his fancy watch because I'm still mad he beats me at cards." Adrian, carrying a toolbox through the doorway, laughed. Elena looked at him and felt none of the old panic. Not because life had become perfect, but because she was no longer choosing from fear. He crossed the kitchen, kissed her forehead softly, and handed her the spare key. This time, when love entered her life, it did not arrive asking what she could sacrifice. It arrived asking what they could build. And at last, Elena had an answer. So that's where this story comes to an end, my dear friends. And if you're still here with me right now, then maybe something in Elena's journey has touched your heart in a very personal way. Maybe it reminded you that being quiet does not mean being weak, and starting over does not mean you have failed. One of the deepest lessons in this story is that your value does not disappear just because others refuse to see it. As the Stoics taught, we cannot always control what people do to us, but we can control who we become because of it. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the obstacle becomes the way, and that truth feels so real here. Elena's pain, rejection, and fear became the very path that led her back to her strength. Healing often begins when we stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "What can this teach me?" If this story stayed with you, if it made you feel seen, stronger, or a little more hopeful, please like this video, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us keep telling stories that heal, uplift, and remind people they are never as powerless as they think. Please note that this story is a dramatized fictional narrative created for entertainment, inspiration, and emotional reflection. The characters, events, and situations are written in a storytelling format designed to explore themes such as resilience, healing, dignity, motherhood, betrayal, and personal growth. While some emotions and struggles in the story may feel relatable to real life, this content is not presented as news, documentary material, or a factual account of real individuals or real legal events. Certain details may be heightened for dramatic effect in order to create a stronger emotional experience for viewers. The purpose of this video is to encourage reflection, hope, and meaningful conversation, not to mislead or misrepresent reality. Every lesson shared through this story is meant to support viewers on a human level through storytelling. If this message resonates with you, please like, share, and subscribe so we can continue bringing you heartfelt stories with meaningful life lessons.